In 1957, a 24-year-old Australian man named John Longhurst visited the newly opened Disneyland Park in Anaheim, California. A regular viewer of the Disneyland television show, Longhurst was interested not just with the park, but the man who made it. The trip to Disneyland did not disappoint. Longhurst recalled, quote, "It was something different to anything I'd ever seen. There was something romantic about it." This trip began what would become a lifelong obsession with both Disneyland and Walt Disney. Longhurst studied Walt Disney's life and philosophy. He learned the story of Walt's inspiration for Disneyland, in which Walt described sitting on a bench at Griffith Park, watching his daughters on a carousel.
I felt that there should be something built where that the parents and the children could have fun together.
A few years after he returned to Australia from his first Disneyland trip, Longhurst took his own children to a local animal park. At one point during their visit, Longhurst's children became interested in a monkey exhibit. Shortly after arriving to see the monkeys, the animals began to urinate, and the stench was so potent that one of the kids became ill. In an attempt to turn the day around, Longhurst took the children to get a milkshake, only to be served by a woman who was constantly scratching herself while making the drinks. Longhurst quickly left with his children, and as he drove away, he had his own Walt Disney moment. He said to himself, quote, "Somebody's got to do something about this." After selling a profitable lawnmower business, Longhurst began to more seriously consider the prospect of building his own theme park. He set out to find a suitable site for the project, but after repeated failed attempts, Longhurst, in his own recollection of the events, spoke with God, asking, quote, "Lord, where am I going to get this site to build my park?" According to Longhurst, God responded, quote, 10 miles out on the Gold Coast. The area was perfect. Not only was it already a popular holiday destination, but there was land available. However, Longhurst was very selective about the land he needed for his park, requiring that the property have certain features for ideas he had. In 1974, Longhurst purchased 85 hectares, or 210 acres of land, 10 miles from the Gold Coast, per God's suggestion. Design and construction would take multiple years, with Longhurst spending over 2 years operating a bulldozer by himself to construct the park's layout. 7 years and around $13 million later, the project was finished, and on December 15, 1981, Longhurst's Dream Park, aptly titled Dream World, opened to the public. When guests entered the park, they were introduced to a world of wonder unlike they had ever seen, assuming they had not been to Disneyland. Dream World's entrance was marked by a building that appeared to be a large train station. Beyond this was a quaint main street, with buildings that resembled a turn-of-the-century American town. Guests could also find an area resembling an Old West town, with a grand river around which a paddle wheeler would travel. The park was described as Australia's answer to Disneyland, but it might be more fair to say that it was Australia's knockoff of Disneyland. This is exactly what Longhurst had hoped for, and even accounting for the similarities, the results were impressive. Dreamworld did have a few unique attractions, namely a state-of-the-art IMAX theater that dazzled guests. And even the elements that were directly lifted from Disneyland were given a unique Australian identity. Rather than Mickey and Minnie Mouse, Dreamworld had Kenny Koala and Belinda Brown. Rather than the Steamboat's river simply being the rivers of America, Dreamworld's river was named the Murrissippi River, a hybrid of North America's Mississippi River and Australia's Murray River. The river was flanked by Old West buildings on one side and Australian buildings on the other. This hybrid of Disneyland entertainment with Australian touches was a practice that would continue, and just a few months after opening, Dreamworld had another Disney attraction with an Australian twist. In 1982, a new area named Gumtree Gully debuted on the banks of the Murrissippi River. The area was home to Gumtree Gully Hall, where Dreamworld guests could find the Koala Country Jamboree. This was a direct ripoff of Disney's Country Bear Jamboree, but with koalas. This elaborate animatronic show saw many scenes of koalas singing both classic Australian and American songs. Just like the Country Bear Jamboree, the show had a host and multiple musical acts. Despite the koala focus of the attraction, many other animal musicians were featured. There is a number where a rabbit sings Itsy Bitsy Teeny Weeny Yellow Polka Dot Bikini. There is a number where an American bear shows up and sings a Confederate Army folk song. And there is even a number where a kangaroo sings an Australian lullaby, and in her pouch is a baby kangaroo who comes out and sings with her. The show also featured a beast known as the bunyip. The bunyip is an aquatic monster that originates from Aboriginal mythology. In the Koala Country Jamboree, though, the bunyip sings a love song and wears a big cowboy hat. All of the acts come back in the end to sing Peter Allen's I Still Call Australia Home, before the big finale, Tie Me Kangaroo Down Sport, which is the most Australian song of all time.
Tie me kangaroo down, tie me kangaroo down. All together now.
The Koala Country Jamboree was well received by guests and would become a favorite among Dreamworld fans. As time went on, Dreamworld continued to grow and expand, receiving many standard off-the-shelf amusement rides and some signature attractions. By the late 1980s, Dreamworld was Australia's #1 tourist attraction, despite Longhurst originally stating that he would like to own the park for the rest of his life. After consideration, he decided to sell the park to entrepreneur Bruce Jenkins and his company Dreamco. Longhurst believed Jenkins would continue developing his dream and provide the park with necessary cash flow. Unfortunately, this was not the case. After purchasing Dreamworld in 1989, Jenkins and Dreamco were immediately in a dire state, and the park was taken over by financial firm Ernst & Young. The new management was more successful, increasing visits by 51% to a total of 1.8 million visitors per year. The park would change hands twice more before the turn of the century. By the early 2000s, Dreamworld was still struggling with finances, but new attractions gave hope for the park's future. A variety of wildlife exhibits had been added, and in 2002, a partnership with Nickelodeon allowed the park's Kiddyland, Kennyland, to transition to Nickelodeon Central. In 2004, another Australian theme park, Wonderland Sydney, closed for good, and Dreamworld took the crown for the largest theme park in Australia. The success of Nickelodeon Central led Dreamworld to seek out more partnerships with recognizable properties, and in 2005, they were able to secure perhaps their most lucrative agreement yet. And just as Longhurst had done 3 decades prior, Dreamworld set out to make a Disney-caliber attraction with a distinct Australian twist. Lucky for them, there was already an Australian entertainment property that was taking the world by storm. The Wiggles are a children's music group that was founded in 1991. The group was started by Anthony Field, a member of the Australian pop band The Cockroaches. At the time, Field was studying early childhood education at Macquarie University in Sydney, alongside another Cockroaches collaborator, Greg Page, and a guitarist, Murray Cook. Together, the three combined their musical talent with their interest in early childhood development, intending to create an album of songs that could act as an educational tool. After recruiting another Cockroaches band member, keyboardist Jeff Fatt, the group formed The Wiggles. Over 2 years, the group wrote and recorded their first album, repurposing many Cockroaches songs into more child-friendly Wiggles numbers.
It's Wiggle time!
The band evolved slowly over the next few years, adding supporting characters such as Captain Feathersword, Henry the Octopus, Wags the Dog, and Dorothy the Dinosaur. The group also began wearing their iconic outfits, brightly colored skivvies. The Wiggles worked diligently, releasing more albums, performing live, and producing music videos and tapes. In 1994, the band released the album Yummy Yummy, featuring 2 massive hits for the group, Hot Potato,
Hot potato,
and Fruit Salad.
fruit salad, yummy, yummy.
In 1995, they released the album Big Red Car, along with the accompanying video, Big Red Car. This was a notable moment in Wiggles lore, as it introduced the band's iconic vehicle, the titular Big Red Car. At first, the car was represented with a crude cardboard cutout, and the song featured on the album about the Big Red Car would not be the vehicle's more iconic number.
Riding in a big red car.
In 1997, the Wiggles' first and only theatrical film, The Wiggles Movie, was released in theaters. This film featured the first 3-dimensional iteration of the Big Red Car, which was built from a dune buggy. The following year, in 1998, the Wiggles released their 9th studio album, Toot Toot, which featured the hit track Toot Toot Chugga Chugga Big Red Car.
Toot toot chugga chugga big red car. We'll travel near and we'll travel far.
This would be the car's iconic song, and it would take over the world. Around this time, the Wiggles began to expand into international markets, and found major success in the United States, initially touring with Barney Live before embarking on a tour of their own. This is when Wigglemania was at its peak. By 2005, the Wiggles had released 21 studio albums, filmed 3 television series, and toured all over the world. The group was struggling to meet the demand, and the number of performances were taking a toll on the health of the group, namely Anthony Field and Greg Page. This level of wiggling was simply not sustainable, but Wigglemania was showing no signs of stopping. The Wiggles made 45 million Australian dollars in 2004, or nearly 34 million US dollars. This made them the highest paid Australian entertainers, beating out Nicole Kidman and Russell Crowe. The Wiggles empire was an intoxicating gravy train, the kind that only comes from singing about potatoes and dancing with a giant octopus, and it was a machine that could not be stopped. In an effort to maintain their health and stay closer to home, the Wiggles considered cutting down on their live performances. To supplement the lack of live shows, the group began to explore other ventures. The first was a chain of Wiggly Play Centers in Sydney. These entertainment centers were similar to those operated by Chuck E. Cheese and Discovery Zone. The Wiggly Play Centers featured indoor playgrounds, bouncy houses, and event spaces to host birthday parties. The Wiggly Play Centers allowed Wiggles fans to interact with the group without the Wiggles themselves needing to be present. Shortly after opening, a similar concept was announced, but this venture would be far more ambitious than a play center. In May of 2005, the Wiggles announced that they had entered an agreement with Dreamworld Theme Park. Dreamworld CEO Greg Shaw told the press, quote, "We will be talking to them about how we can develop that opportunity. These discussions must have occurred fast, because just 2 months later, it was announced that a new Wiggles-themed area was coming to Dreamworld. The expansion would cost 7 million Australian dollars, or around 5.2 million US dollars. The new land would include shops, an activity center, a playground, an animal nursery, and a brand new ride, the first new dark ride to be built in Australia in nearly 2 decades. The new land would take the place of Gumtree Gully. By this point, the space was far past its prime. Gumtree Gully Hall and the Koala Country Jamboree had already been closed for 3 years. Any hope for the return of the show was dashed with the announcement of the new Wiggles Land, whose flagship dark ride would take the space formerly occupied by the singing koalas. The new dark ride would not be unique just for its wiggly theme, but also for its advanced technology. The planned attraction would be a trackless dark ride, a style of ride that was still being introduced to many theme parks in the mid-2000s. Since their inception, dark rides have sent guests along a rigid and often visible track. This track was limiting to both the attraction's range of movement and its immersive theming. Throughout the late 20th century, ride designers experimented with ways to overcome these obstacles. Disney's Omnimover system allowed ride cars to pivot and for the most part hid the ride path from view, but this system was still on a track. It would not be until October 1st, 1982 that the first trackless ride system would be introduced with Epcot Center's Universe of Energy. Large theater seats full of guests passed throughout the attraction in unison with each other, in a slow-moving dance, with no track perceivable to guests. However, this was not a true trackless ride system either, as a 1/8-inch guide wire was embedded into the attraction's floor, laying out the ride's path. The guide wire would transmit a radio signal to each vehicle, the strength of which would communicate the vehicle's position in relation to the track. This ride system was a technological marvel in 1982. Each vehicle needed its own computer, which would then communicate with the attraction's master computer. The vehicles would also need to have their own propulsion systems, and most challenging, their own power and charging systems. The Imagineer solution to the latter was to embed charging plates into the floor, which used a state-of-the-art inductive power coupling system to charge the ride cars at 2 points throughout their journey. While Universe of Energy was not technically a trackless dark ride by modern standards, it did introduce multiple innovations necessary for later systems to succeed. The guide wire system would be reused in 1989 for the Great Movie Ride, and again in 1994 for the Twilight Zone Tower of Terror, with the system improving with each iteration. These attractions were all well received, obscuring the ride path and creating a more surprising experience for guests. While these systems delivered the theming benefits of a trackless ride system, the true potential of free range of motion had yet to be achieved. This was until the year 2000, when Tokyo Disneyland received a new dark ride named Pooh's Honey Hunt. Pooh's Honey Hunt was a breathtaking attraction, with a rumored budget of $130 million. On top of innovative effects and elaborate environments, the attraction's most impressive element was its true trackless ride system. Rather than using guide wires, Pooh's Honey Hunt used a local positioning system in which a sensor array communicated with the ride cars and the attraction's main computer. Unlike with a guide wire, this allowed for the ride paths to be completely virtual. Disney made great use of this technology, sending cars on different paths at the same time and synchronizing movements, resulting in fun choreography. This trackless ride system would be implemented and innovated in more Disney parks throughout the world, with the notable additions of motion simulation in Ratatouille the Adventure and an elevator and drop shaft in Star Wars Rise of the Resistance. Other companies have developed their own trackless ride systems using local positioning. leading to a trackless ride renaissance in the theme park industry that is still ongoing. However, back in 2005, when the Wiggles ride was being developed, local positioning systems for trackless rides were both new and prohibitively expensive. The company had reportedly piquing the interest of both Disney parks and Universal Studios. To prove their ability to develop a full-scale theme park attraction, SimTech built a proof-of-concept standalone ride named the Emperor's Tomb. This shooting dark ride was built near the company's headquarters in Christchurch, New Zealand. The ride used the new AGV system and also showcased SimTech's ability to produce animatronics and detailed show scenes. It would not be long after debuting this proof of concept that Dreamworld would contract SimTech to design and construct the Wiggles Dark Ride. SimTech would provide the ride system, animatronics, and show scenes. Arvis, a sound technology company, was also contracted to provide a unique audio system to each ride car, included a microphone, a push button, and a speaker system. According to Arvis, this was, quote, the world's first onboard karaoke system for an amusement ride vehicle, and that, quote, special microphones had to be developed so that there was no feedback from the speakers directly next to them. Gumtree Gully was transformed quickly, with the new Wiggles area ready to open after just 4 months of construction. The new land, named Wiggles World, had its opening ceremonies on September 13, 2005, with the Wiggles themselves appearing and taking a ride on the land's signature dark ride, the Big Red Car Ride. The ride and the land would officially open 4 days later, and on September 17, 2005, the children of Australia were welcomed inside a brand new Wiggly World. Guests entered Wiggles World under a whimsical arch featuring illustrations of all 4 Wiggles, Dorothy the Dinosaur, Henry the Octopus, Wags the Dog, and Captain Feathersword. Inside, families could visit the Fun Spot Activity Center for Wiggles-themed games, or visit the banks of the Mississippi River to play on the SS Feathersword playground. Throughout the land, guests could meet Henry the Octopus, Wags the Dog, Dorothy the Dinosaur, and even Captain Feathersword himself. The Gumtree Gully Farmyard Petting Zoo was rethemed to the Wiggles Farmyard Friends. The land also had a gift shop, marketed as the first Wiggles merchandise store, as well as a cafe with healthy foods, appropriately named Yummy Yummy. There was even a recreation of the exterior of the Wiggle House, which allowed guests to get up close and personal with Flora Door, the Wiggle House's sentient door. Wiggles World's main attraction was, of course, the Big Red Car. The exterior featured a prominent marquee beckoning guests into their Wiggles adventure. Guests entered the ride's short queue, with the boarding area just a few feet ahead. A television mounted to the wall displayed Wiggles videos as guests waited in line. Guests watched as their own Big Red Car pulled into the loading station. The ride vehicle was perfectly themed, appearing identical to the Wiggles' iconic car, with the notable additions of room for 3 riders per row and the unique karaoke system. Guests waited patiently for the ride car to reach the loading area, which, depending on how many cars were operating on the track, could take a while. The ride had an advertised top speed of 2 kilometers per hour, or about 1.25 miles per hour. This is slow. For comparison, the Formula Rossa roller coaster at Ferrari World Abu Dhabi tops out at a speed of 240 kilometers per hour, or 149 miles per hour. That's over 100 times faster than the Big Red Car Ride. Even compared to other dark rides, the Big Red Car Ride was slow. For instance, the Haunted Mansion and similar Omnimovers moved twice as fast, and newer trackless dark rides are even faster. Speed was not an advertised element of the Big Red Car Ride, but it would definitely play a role in the energy and pacing of the attraction. Once the car arrived to the loading station, guests board the Big Red Car Ride and buckle up. The doors to the first show scene open, and it is officially time to wiggle. As the Wiggles begin singing Toot Toot Chugga Chugga Big Red Car, the ride vehicles slowly move into the Wiggles garden. Lights illuminate the space as the car turns to face a small TV mounted to the wall. The Wiggles appear on the screen, welcoming guests to the ride and suggesting that they use their microphones to sing along. They then inform riders that they will be entering the Wiggle House next.
Why don't we go into the house and we can sing some songs together?
Toot Toot Chugga Chugga Big Red Car begins to play again as the vehicles slowly move into the Wiggles kitchen. The car turns to face another TV screen, this time featuring Just Anthony, who instructs riders to sing Hot Potato. As the song begins, the cabinets, refrigerator, and oven open and close to the music.
Potato, potato, potato.
Next up is the Wiggles Lounge Room. Toot Toot Chugga Chugga Big Red Car plays again as the cars slowly move into the scene. On the wall, the doors to all of the Wiggles bedrooms can be seen, an iconic set to those familiar with Wiggles lore. After entering this room, the car turns to face a third TV screen. In this video, Jeff is sleeping and the Wiggles are attempting to wake him up. They ask that you use your microphone to shout, "Wake up, Jeff."
1, 2, 3.
Wake up!
Skokni v letota.
Iztraži go.
In the mid-90s, animation was changing, for better or for worse. With the success of Disney Pixar's Toy Story in 1995, computer-generated imagery was proving itself to be a real player within the realm of feature-length entertainment. For the first time, Pixar had defined what was possible, and for other animation studios, transitioning to a 3D format no longer felt like such a blind leap of faith. With that being said, Pixar would almost exclusively dominate the realm of animated films in the 90s, without any real competition until DreamWorks hit its stride with Shrek in 2001. Before that, it was Disney's impressive catalog of expertly animated feature films versus DreamWorks' ants. You gotta start somewhere. The undertaking. There were really only a handful of companies with the resources to even take the chance. This led many studios to set their sights on smaller budget projects more fit for television. While Pixar ruled the feature-length world with an iron fist, many smaller animation studios would take the plunge into developing fully 3D animated projects for TV. This would lead to a novel surge of 3D animated television shows in the mid-90s that, while visually impressive, left some of us thinking, just because we can, doesn't mean we should.
Just no pleasing some people.
Regardless, the trend had swept throughout the entire entertainment industry and would open more and more networks up to the idea of greenlighting their next big show as a CG product. As luck would have it, this particular climate would set the stage for writer-director John A. Davis to catch his first big break. And it all started from an idea Davis had in the early 80s. Around this time, a young Davis was toying with the idea of a live-action short film starring a boy genius named Jimmy Neutron. Just kidding, it was Johnny Quasar. We're not quite there yet. The character was a sort of alter ego for Davis, who was always fascinated by gadgets and science fiction as a boy, but never quite had the math skills or technical know-how to pursue it as a career. Regardless, Davis would live vicariously through his character, developing a short narrative around Quasar titled Runaway Rocket Boy. The original premise was scripted and storyboarded, telling the tale of a young boy who runs away from his parents in a rocket ship. Davis had built up big hopes for the project, picturing a film clad with special effects and outlandish gadgets, somewhat akin to the final product we would eventually get. But in the 1980s, things weren't so DIY. In order to get the ball rolling on the concept, Davis would need to pitch the show to production companies, and would even resort to applying for a government grant. Unfortunately, this would not pan out, and Davis was denied funding on the grounds that, although the idea revolved around a boy genius, the show wasn't all that educational or informative. Unless Davis was able to provide a scientific explanation for the shrink ray or detailed insight on the dietary components of Purple Flurp, it looked like he'd be out of luck. The rejection would result in Runaway Rocket Boy getting shelved for quite a lengthy period of time. It was only much later in the mid-90s that Davis would rediscover the script while moving. Upon revisiting the story and its characters, Davis came to the realization that Runaway Rocket Boy would make a perfect fit for a CG animated show, something that Davis and his animation studio had been dabbling into at the time. A decade ago, this kind of approach wasn't really realistic, but now Pixar and many other studios had proven that 3D animated entertainment was a real possibility. This would motivate Davis to pursue the idea with his own studio, DNA Productions. You know the one.
Hi, I'm Paul.
In 1995, the studio would compile a 40-second visual demo starring the Runaway Rocket Boy himself, alongside his new sidekick, Goddard. The demo was short but sweet, with Quasar flying into frame on a rocket, introducing himself, and then veering off into space to avoid an asteroid. Although brief, the animated demo did a perfect job of illustrating the potential of the character, with a charming and concise monologue that could flawlessly serve as the basis for an entire brainstorming session had it been given to writers. Not to mention, the animation was incredibly impressive.
I'm a genius, but sometimes I'm too smart for my own good.
Turns out DNA Productions was working with a 3D animation software called Lightwave. And this wasn't a big-budget Pixar program or an industry-standard set of tools. What DNA was able to accomplish with commercial software in 1995 was genuinely impressive, and it motivated the team to show off their work at the 1995 SIGGRAPH convention, which was hosted by an association with a special interest in computer graphics. There at the convention, Davis and his studio would submit the film into a contest exclusively for Lightwave projects. And to the company's surprise, Runaway Rocket Boy would steal the show, receiving 2 separate awards that night, one for Best Character Animation, and the other for Best in Show. The project was praised for its smooth animation and cartoonish character design, setting it apart from the majority of studios striving for a more photorealistic approach to their renders. These achievements would end up garnering the project a fair bit of buzz in the animation community. Shortly after, Hollywood actor-producer Steve Odekirk would stumble across some still images of Johnny Quasar in an animation magazine, instantly piquing his interest. Odekirk was quite the hotshot in the entertainment industry, known best for his collaborations with Jim Carrey on the Ace Ventura series, a character with a suspiciously familiar haircut. Turns out, Odekirk had taken a particular interest in the world of 3D animation, and was eager to get in touch with Davis and his team about the demo. Odekirk cold-called Davis at his studio in Dallas, in the hopes that he could see the full video along with anything else the team had done with Quasar. After receiving the original demo and story bible, Odekirk was sold, proving eager to join forces with Davis's company to help pitch the idea to bigger networks. This would result in DNA Productions joining forces with O Entertainment, which was Odekirk's production company at the time. The partners would work to flesh out the idea into a marketable television show, reworking the name to The Adventures of Johnny Quasar, and tweaking aspects of the original character to appear more childlike. I mean, for God's sake, they gave the kid a receding hairline. Keith Alcorn, Davis's partner at DNA, would take on most of the character design, swapping out Johnny's lab coat for a regular t-shirt and changing his hair in favor of a more eccentric style. Only then would the producers deem the concept ready for a network tour. The first stop on the team's list was Nickelodeon, and to Davis's surprise, it would also be their last. Nickelodeon immediately fell in love with the concept. Johnny Quasar's superpowered mind and knack for adventure made him the perfect Nick Kid, as observed by then-president of Nickelodeon, Albie Hecht, who famously dubbed Quasar as a mix between Bart Simpson and Albert Einstein. In reality, it's no wonder that Davis's pitch caught Nickelodeon's attention. Jimmy's 3D character design completely set him apart from many of Nick's current and future characters like SpongeBob, Arnold, Tommy, and Lil Bill. Actually, no, not Little Bill. Let's forget about Little Bill. Naturally, a deal was struck, and Nickelodeon would commission a 13-minute pilot episode in the fall of 1995. From there, Johnny Quasar would fall headfirst into review purgatory, with over 2 lengthy years of pull this and add that to draw out the project's development. During that time, a newly animated demo would be produced, serving as a sort of updated take on the original 1995 demo of Johnny Quasar. Nickelodeon loved it, but toward the end of the review process, Davis was forced to rework Johnny's name, as it already shared similarities with 2 pre-existing cartoon characters, those being Johnny Quest and Captain Quasar. Oh, and he had 24 hours to do it, so the story goes. Davis would frantically brainstorm names with his wife that night, experimenting with a myriad of scientific terms like proton and electron before finally settling on Jimmy Neutron. And with that out of the way, the team could finally begin work on the pilot episode. Production would begin in late 1997, with the pilot fully completed sometime in '98. The first episode of Jimmy Neutron was cleverly titled Runaway Rocket Boy, as an homage to the project's roots, and featured all the characters and quirks that fans would soon come to know and love.
You promised to help me with math class.
Sure, I know. Okay, I will.
It was early Jimmy, but Jimmy nonetheless, and Nickelodeon absolutely loved it. When Davis asked the company what the next move was for the show, Nickelodeon would spill the news that they had even bigger plans for the franchise. Not only did Nick want to produce a television show, they also wanted to release a feature-length film as well. Davis described this moment as jaw-dropping. At the time, Davis had been working up the courage just to propose a theatrical short to open up the next Rugrats movie, and never dreamed that Nick would want a feature-length film so early in the game. Yet at the same time, this also sparked an idea for Davis. Originally, Nickelodeon proposed to air the television show first, and follow up with the movie shortly after. But what if they did it in reverse? With 3D animation, everything that was produced became a reusable asset, and if the studio developed all these assets with a feature film budget, they could reuse the high-quality models once it was time to work on the show. Nickelodeon was hesitant at first. Attracting a movie audience for a character that lacked any pre-existing media would be a definite risk, and the TV show first approach seemed like a more surefire way to introduce Jimmy to the world. But Davis's reasoning made a lot of sense. Producing the movie first would allow for the team to develop a higher quality TV show, and possibly improve the longevity and success of the franchise. Every character, every scene, every bush, every gadget, it could all be recycled. And it didn't stop there. Assets could and would be reused for every promotion and print ad that Jimmy Neutron would do. With CG animation still in its early stages, this kind of forward-thinking approach was what allowed 3D animated shows to thrive. In the end, Nick decided that with the right amount of promotion, launching with the movie was a viable option. And in the fall of 1999, Jimmy Neutron Boy Genius would be greenlit for production. The movie was given a budget of $30 million, allowing Davis and his team to significantly increase the capacity of their offices. The company's staff burst from just 30 employees to 130, granting the studio the means to achieve their tightly set deadlines. This would also allow for more tweaking to be done to the show's characters, which would differ slightly from the original pilot episode. Jimmy's shirt would change, Sheen's ethnicity would switch from Japanese to Mexican, and Carl would be redrawn to look less like his dad. Steps were taken to forego the traditional rulebook of CG animation, with realistic lighting and character design thrown to the wayside in favor of more stylistic approaches. If a light or a shadow didn't look right in a certain shot, it would be taken out, regardless of whether or not it physically made sense to be there. Characters were given simplistic and cartoonish designs that were easier to animate, along with characteristics that influenced the structure of the world around them, like the cars modeled to fit their outrageously large heads. Additionally, their sculpted, graphic look made the modeling process easier too, without needing to worry about realistic textures for cloth or hair. In a way, the movie's low budget pushed animators to get creative, and this ultimately contributed to its originality. And in the world of animation, standing out was everything. In 1999, you could practically count on one hand the number of 3D animated films that had been released on the big screen, and literally all of them had been produced by Disney or DreamWorks. When Nickelodeon threw their hat in the ring, it was open knowledge that they were going up against the big dogs. But at the same time, it never felt like the movie was trying to prove anything. Davis knew their budget was significantly lower than that of Toy Stories or A Bug's Life, but it didn't matter. The atmosphere and concepts behind the project were entirely unique, and that was part of its charm. The show's creators would even go as far as to take ideas from their own children, with Steve Odekirk's 6-year-old daughter coining the idea for burp soda.
A guaranteed 1 burp per sip.
Zoe Odekirk would go on to be listed under the special thanks for the movie's end credits. Additionally, Nickelodeon's budget made for a simpler production process. While many other companies were using complex rendering programs and working with software engineers to produce state-of-the-art animation, Jimmy Neutron was built with simple, commercial software that was accessible to anyone. And while the team's tool set and workflow had somewhat increased in complexity, much of the process was still the same. This allowed the team to complete the entire film in just 24 months, roughly half the time it took the average CG film to be completed. To make things even more exciting, Jimmy Neutron was already an enormous hit with children, as Nickelodeon had been working hard to promote the character during the movie's production. Not only were there online comics and flash games, but there were also clever tie-in promotions with other Nickelodeon shows. These promotional gags would have Jimmy interrupt an episode of SpongeBob or the Rugrats to make a little mischief with one of his gadgets before quickly disappearing off screen. It was a somewhat heartwarming collaboration, as the shows that cooperated in the promotion would have to accomplish work on their end to stage the gag and help welcome Jimmy to the Nickelodeon family. There was also a series of interstitial shorts that would air between episodes of Nickelodeon shows, helping to familiarize audiences with the movie's characters prior to the release of the film. In many ways, kids felt like they already knew Jimmy Neutron well before the theatrical announcement, and that was kind of Nick's plan. Jimmy Neutron had placed within the top 25 favorite cartoon show characters on television, which was determined by a consumer familiarity survey that helped companies gauge the appeal of certain public brands. And this survey was conducted before any hard piece of media had even been published for the Boy Genius. From the looks of it, Nick's promotion was turning out to be everything they'd hoped for. It was 2001 at this point, and as production was wrapping up for the film, a release date was finally in sight. And with hype for the Jimmy Neutron franchise nearly reaching its pre-launch peak, Nick was finally ready to make their movie announcement at the 2001 Kids' Choice Awards. Jimmy would even appear on screen to announce some of the night's winners before being promptly brushed to the side by Rosie O'Donnell, who would go on to raise a very pressing question to the audience.
Anybody here want a slime in sync?
What can you do? It was 2001. But now, with a release date set for late December of that year, the real hype train could begin. Nick would team up with several companies to promote the upcoming movie, including some pretty clever partnerships like the Trident Gum promotion that paired perfectly with Jimmy's iconic bubblegum scene.
Bubble travel is the way of the future!
Nick would also work with Radio Shack to produce the Ultra Orb, an RC car that closely resembled Sheen's spaceship from the film. And of course, who could forget the mediocre video game? In the early 2000s, it was practically a prerequisite. The month before the film's release, the Jimmy Neutron game would launch for all platforms, which would follow the same story as the movie, but just a whole lot less fun and a whole lot more creepy.
Read my lips. N-O. No.
Although this wouldn't stop Nickelodeon from releasing a brand new Jimmy Neutron game for 4 consecutive years in a row.
I feel kind of funny, Jim.
Regardless, Nickelodeon's promotion paid off, because Jimmy Neutron Boy Genius was a hit with children upon its release. Yes, the movie may have only garnered slightly above average reviews by critics, but who cares? Those were boring adults, and this one was for the kids. Jimmy Neutron would even go on to be nominated for the Oscars' first ever award for Best Animated Feature, respectfully losing to DreamWorks' smash hit Shrek. But weep not, my friends, for the real winners are those who now carry the knowledge that Jimmy Neutron Boy Genius is technically an Oscar-nominated film. On top of that, the movie would gross over $102 million worldwide throughout its theatrical run, giving Nickelodeon more than enough reason to follow up with the TV show. The Adventures of Jimmy Neutron would first air in July of 2002, a little over 6 months after the release of the film. Davis's plan had worked perfectly, and the team's strategy to reuse the majority of the assets from the movie resulted in one of the most visually impressive 3D animated shows to ever air at the time. The TV show would go on to make a respectable 3-season run that aired from 2002 to 2006, and would be accompanied by a myriad of video game, book, and merchandising tie-ins that made Jimmy Neutron a Nickelodeon household name. With all this success, you'd assume Nickelodeon would have greenlit a second film shortly after. And you'd be right. The network would in fact move forward with plans to develop a sequel to the original movie, but the project would be subsequently cancelled due to internal disagreements in the writers' room. Turns out, the team in charge of Jimmy's sequel just couldn't agree on an angle for the film, and the indecision would last long enough for Nickelodeon to just scrap the project altogether. In its place, a television spin-off would premiere in 2010, starring Sheen, Jimmy's best friend, which interestingly enough, originated as a rejected television pitch for a show called Red Acres. Eventually, the concept would be reworked as a Jimmy Neutron spin-off to catch Nick's attention. But alas, Planet Sheen would come to an end in 2013, marking the end of the Jimmy Neutron franchise as we know it today. As a matter of fact, it's really still quite a mystery as to why Nickelodeon decided to pull the plug on the original show in the first place. Some blame DNA Productions' involvement with The Ant Bully, a film that was speculated to be responsible for the company's eventual bankruptcy in 2006. Keith Alcorn, co-creator of Jimmy Neutron, has gone on to say that Nickelodeon simply opted not to renew the show for more seasons on the basis that they already had enough material for syndication, a process that involved the leasing of a television show to other networks. Regardless of the reason, Jimmy Neutron is still fondly remembered by fans to this day, and the show's technical achievements helped pave the way for the dozens of 3D animated cartoons that would follow for years to come. As of today, the franchise's fate is caught in a swirl of reboot rumors, false speculation, and fan art so convincing it almost made you think there was a 2023 reboot coming to Paramount+. There's not, sorry. But the love for the show is still there, and maybe, with enough time, Nick will take notice, and everyone's favorite boy genius will blast off again. And if not, hey, at least we still got this.
Are you going to finish that croissant?
Knock yourself out.
If you were a child between the ages of 8 and 13, right at the very end of the 2000s, then you might experience near euphoric levels of nostalgia for Kaponk. In 2009, Hasbro released one of their riskiest product lines in the company's history, when designers managed to package and sell a ball and a cup. But in many ways it was more than that. Hasbro was attempting to sell an attitude, an idea, one that they hoped would cultivate an entire lifestyle brand, nestled somewhere in between 2000 skate culture and dude perfect style trick shots. But just as Kaponk was finding its footing in the market, the product vanished, leaving us with a shelf-life legacy that barely lasted over a year. So today, we're going to be diving deeper than we ever have before on this channel, conducting interviews, uncovering lost media, and learning exactly how this simple yet captivating little game came to be. You see, as we'll come to learn, Kaponk was actually quite an ambitious idea, and at the time, some might have called it a long shot. But in a perfect way, that's kind of what this story is all about. This is how Kaponk sold beer pong to kids. Yeah, I'm not trying that again. Let's start at the beginning. It's the mid-2000s, and Hasbro's game department is in a bit of a conundrum. Like many long-lived toy and game companies, there comes a time when their presence in the market eventually hits a growth ceiling. You see, Hasbro had dozens of hit games on the market, including Monopoly, Connect 4, Battleship, Yahtzee. I mean, the list really does go on. In marketing, these iconic titles are commonly referred to as evergreen products. They never lose demand, sell well throughout the entire year, and in the case of board games, they no longer really even need commercials. They're undeniably timeless, and while that's great for persistent revenue, it's not very productive for growth. When it comes to increasing profits, new products need to be introduced, and most importantly, perform well. And this wasn't really happening for Hasbro.
They would launch about 20 to 30 new products every year, and almost all of them would not live to see a second year. And it was just part of the cycle of, we need new things, we're going to keep trying.
The company was kind of playing it safe, opting to focus on new and improved takes for pre-existing properties. But this wasn't exactly a winning strategy. Enter Dan Sanfilippo, a designer who worked at Hasbro during the mid-2000s who was kind enough to speak to me about his time there.
So my first internship when I was a sophomore in college was working on Star Wars Episode 1 toys. And I was like coloring basically. So I'd go into work and they say, here are these line drawings, pick the color. So I would like color them all with markers. And then when I got my full-time job, it was at the games division. One of my first projects was bringing back the game of Bop It.
Twist it.
The demanding, commanding challenge of Bop It has found a brand new edge.
Bop it.
Bop It Extreme 2.
I started to do more projects like that, or like games like Operation that kind of needed to be refreshed. I changed a lot of that. So I was working on a lot of things that had come and did well, but then kind of faded away and trying to reinvent them for a new generation.
But Hasbro's problems persisted. It was roughly 2007 at this point, and the company still hadn't found their next big breakthrough game. Until now, they had kind of just been throwing 100 darts at a wall and seeing what stuck, which obviously wasn't financially sustainable. In order to try and remedy this, Hasbro would devise a drastic new approach to their product development strategies.
They gave the team members like real autonomy to figure out what to do, because nobody could solve the problem of launching a new game that was a success.
This would incorporate the use of blitz groups, or small teams of 3 that were made up of one designer, one marketer, and a consumer insights specialist. These micro teams would be assigned a demographic, like girls under 10 or preteen boys, and would then collaborate to develop a game concept for that slice of the market.
And they let us go off and do a bunch of research and come back to them with what we thought was the right thing to do. And that's a rare thing in a big company, where it was sort of a bottom-up approach to get to the ideas.
The ultimate goal was for each group to devise a product pitch that would then be presented to the higher-ups at Hasbro. In 2007, Dan was chosen to participate in one of these blitz groups, where he was assigned the demographic for preteen boys. And this was kind of an exciting group.
And I think the biggest insight we had on the boys team was that we don't have a game for boys. There were some games that did well for girls. There was Mall Madness and Dream Phone, and most of the stuff was targeted at preschool kids, and a lot of it was family. Battleship and Risk were the only things that came close. And Risk being kind of a little older, like you kind of need to be a teenager to get into that. And then Battleship, we realized, was being bought by moms in the hopes that dads would play it with their sons. Like there was no boy we ever talked to that couldn't wait to get Battleship. So we had this great like vacuum of like no boy wanted anything our company made.
And so the research began. Dan's team was looking to find out what it was that preteen boys were actually into in 2007. This would lead their team to speak with coaches, parents, and teachers to try and get a better understanding of this demographic. And yes, they spoke to young boys too, but oftentimes it was the adults that gave better insight into what children were actually into. Sure, an 8-year-old boy could tell you that he liked Super Soakers, but a parent or guardian could tell you why. They might say things like, oh, he likes getting messy, or he likes having wars with his friends. This helped to identify opportunity areas in their research. Eventually, Dan and his team would pinpoint 3 distinct behavioral patterns that preteen boys engaged in. 1. They liked gross-out toys, things that got messy. 2. They enjoyed violence and roughhousing. 3. They liked engaging in activities that made them feel more mature than they actually were.
When you're between the ages of 8 and 12, you kind of want to be seen of as like tougher, older, more mature than you actually are. And anything that's associated with childhood or is too cute or too kid-like just feels like not cool at that point.
This third point inevitably became the behavioral pattern that Dan's team chose to focus on. Sure, options 1 and 2 had their merits, but they had pretty valid reasons to avoid them. While it's true that boys do love violence and roughhousing, Hasbro kind of had all the violent implications they needed with their brand Nerf. On top of that, many kids had the option to play violent video games, and that was the last thing Hasbro wanted to compete with. In regards to their gross-out option, the truth was they kind of just had trouble finding an angle.
It was challenging. We had like hundreds of concepts. There was something called mud ball we were looking at, but we had some drawings of kids basically like throwing a squishy sponge at each other that had like a die in it or something. There was like fart racers, which was a racing game with cars, and they would use like air power and they would actually make fart noises. That one ended up being a little younger, but...
So Dan and his team began work on their third lead, the one later dubbed as the Be the Man approach, which focused on preteen boys and their infatuation with activities that older teens and adults would engage in. Ultimately, the goal was to build a game concept off of one of these grown-up activities. The team bounced around a lot between gambling and bar games, but the game idea they kept coming back to was one they themselves all played in college.
When we kept coming back to beer pong, because they could do it, number one, and number two, its association with college parties instantly gave it a coolness factor.
Now, right off the cuff, the game doesn't sound like the most morally sound concept to be marketing towards children, but Dan realized that as soon as the adult elements of drinking were stripped away, you were actually left with a pretty addicting game of skill. And this was coincidentally one of the concepts that young boys were most attracted to. It was the idea of skill, mastery, and being able to show off that made beer pong so enticing, or darts or skateboarding for that matter. It was a way to one-up your buddies, look cool, and be the man. What made this idea even more convincing was that they kind of already had a proof of concept.
We had a game called Bullseye Ball, which kind of looked like skee ball.
Bullseye ball, you're taking aim, bouncing balls and nailing the bullseye. Faster, the clock is ticking.
Released in 2003, Bullseye Ball would have players bouncing small metal marbles off a trampoline in order to score points. It was actually one of Hasbro's new ideas that managed to perform fairly well, and the game is still in print today. But in 2007, Bullseye Ball was a great framework for the kind of idea Dan and his team wanted to achieve, just with many, many modifications. You see, Bullseye Ball was addicting, and it was beer pong-esque, but it didn't place the same amount of emphasis on skill.
It was very neutral. It had no edge to it. It wasn't like an interesting, cool thing. But it was just really, we knew it was addictive, and we knew kids, once they started to play it, really liked to play it.
With this knowledge in mind, the team would eventually produce their first ever prototype called Kapong. This concept made use of 3 cups and a ping pong ball. Each cup was stacked at a different level, and each rewarded the player with a different number of points by lighting up and making sounds. Players would then take turns making shots at the cups, and the player with the most points after a predetermined number of rounds was the winner. They also hoped that an edgier approach to packaging design would be a selling point for the game. Now, this concept was not the one that eventually made it to market, but it was the one they would pitch to the CEO of Hasbro.
My boss, Alan Roach, and the marketing partner made a presentation to the CEO of the company, Brian Goldner, and it was like this controversial
A small,
thing,
blurry man coming out of the TV.
But they're never going to go for it because everybody's going to laugh that it's kind of like beer.
Man scared 'cause someone coming out of the TV.
Scary green figure comes out TV of a young man, The Ring.
Insect stealing diamond ring. No, I won't marry you.
Proposed got rejected.
A guy asking for marriage.
A dog wearing pants holding sword. A freaky dog with a freaky thing in its freaky hand bulge.
Buff Brian, from Family Guy, acting freaky.
Buff Brian from Family Guy acting freaky.
You're scared of women, you freak.
Man is very scared of women. What did women do?
Beyoncé, Nicki Minaj and Hannah Montana declaring World War III. We're making cubes now.
An Enderman left a stupid block of dirt near my house. Enderman stealing Freaky Steve's blocks. Minecraft Steve giving villager a dirt block.
Pocket Coochie.
Pussy Pocket.
Fatty.
Someone's aunt? Out with their cat?
Ben 10's grandfather petting a small cat. A pig getting carried by Sky 'cause High is a good guy. Double chin stabbing a bird.
Orange obese man murdering a bird. Yano. Badass cat walking in slow-mo with an explosion behind it. Cool cat with sunglasses.
RuPaul as a cat.
A cute cat with a granddad head.
Cat playing with yarn but Sky 666 has other nefarious plans.
Cat stole bread. Furry porn.
Jordan Ramsay eating breakfast.
Hitmonchan trying to bacon and eggs, but she got roasted.
White dreadhead cooking breakfast.
Bacon hair on Roblox cooking, I suppose.
Default Roblox Savvy is the grill master.
Dildo made of rulers and pencils.
Did you try Googling it?
Sky has a baby abusing the bat on his shoulder.
Sky terrorizing a baby bat.
Emo twink with a bat.
Goblin.
I did not know the Goblin from Clash of Clans had that riz.
Goblin is a freak with it.
Sky rich.
A cloudy cloud going to destroy someone's day.
Angry cloud lightning, high voltage sign.
Angry lightning cloud.
Black cloud and lightning coming out of it.
Let's just say mouth game was insane. Pause.
Yowie.
Milking a cow and the cow is screaming. A cow and a rabbit and a cat.
A cowabunny and a cat.
Animal riding echother.
An ostrich riding a dog riding a pig.
Sheep on top of dog, and dog on top of pig. Stacked sheep.
Go Joe Hollow purple in a Walmart employee. Average American police.
Fat cop.
Donut police ready to shoot you pew pew.
A French person eating a pen.
No.
Someone was very sure in their no it seems. So, no. Oh nor, the circle machine made a triangle. Circle make triangle and Teresa cat. Angry birds getting freaky.
I'm just a freak.
SCP, I forgot the guy when you look.
Of an SCP creature.
Clock. Flying cat.
Big ass buff gray cat.
Kitty.
Cat boy cute with Shrek ears.
A cute alien.
Shrek smashed an alien. Wood. Elmo fighting Mike Tyson in the Office film set.
Stop touching me, Elmo.
Tickle me Elmo going horribly wrong.
Tickle me Elmo on fire. Drake being burned alive yet he still wants to diddle.
Draw a flower, BTW, you are sick.
Flower from Fortnite.
Minecraft Steve riding into battle on a baby lion. Minecraft Steve riding baby lion for Mo.
Minecraft Steve riding horse. Preganogged Steve from the Menser aft.
Steve pregant and water broken.
Sogoku. Goku about to go ultra freaky mode.
Pong. But we took them through that story of like, we talked to this many kids, we found these opportunity areas, we tested these concepts. The winning concept is this, and it's bounce a ball into a cup. And then like, they're like, yeah, this makes sense, let's go for it.
Although the idea was simple, Hasbro understood their research and appreciated the approach, ultimately sending the product into the next stage of development.
So I remember Alan coming out of the presentation be like, we just sold it beer pong.
Now, with the project greenlighted, Hasbro would begin to invest resources into the idea, which meant Dan and his little Blitz team would grow exponentially. At this point, a roadmap was being laid out, a budget had been drawn, and Dan and his team felt like they had a pretty clear vision of their new product. But as development began, this vision would start to blur.
When you sell something in like that, everyone agrees to the concept, but then there's a period of refinement, right? Where you go from that raw idea to what are we actually going to make and how much is it going to cost.
The first problem the team encountered was their cost of production. Turns out packaging 3 cups that required sensors, lights, and sounds was kind of an expensive route to take, especially considering their goals. Early on, the team speculated on how they could, quote, sell 15 cents worth of components for $15, which I'm sure was a bit of an exaggeration, but you get the idea. They didn't want the product to be too expensive. It's common for toy companies to try and sell products that kids can buy with an allowance, and that was clearly the goal here as well. Another issue was that the game was a little too restrictive with how much players could actually show off. There just wasn't much variety. You couldn't really one-up your buddy by doing anything remarkable, you could only score more points. These factors had become a legitimate problem, with the potential to send their entire team back to the drawing board. In order to remedy this issue, they'd have to rework the concept to be simpler, cheaper, yet still more effective. It wasn't going to be easy. But then, Dan got an email that would change the entire course of the product's development.
The VP of design, Alan Gong, had a teenage son, and he was like, my son can't stop watching this video. And he sent it to everybody on the team. And immediately we were like, oh, this is it.
The video was titled Billy Balls 2. Starring in the video was professional skateboarder Billy Marks, engaging in one of his favorite pastimes, throwing a ping pong ball into a solo cup in as many creative ways as possible. At first glance, this video could be easily dismissed as some college-aged kid with too much time on his hands, but in reality, Billy Marks had unintentionally immortalized himself as one of the founding fathers of trickshot, a genre of content creation that would skyrocket in popularity throughout the following decade. Trickshot videos centered around a person accomplishing some sort of impressive feat of hand-eye coordination, usually through the use of a common item like a frisbee, paper airplane, or, in Billy's case, a ping pong ball. The trend of trickshot challenges would see a meteoric rise throughout the tens, with creators like Dude Perfect and That's Amazing amassing monolithic online followings. It was a rapidly growing trend, and Billy's video made him a pioneer. During a time when the project's direction had begun to lose track, Billy Marks had breathed new life into their idea. All the elements the team were looking for were right there. The ability to show off, the prestige of mastery, the cool ties to skater culture. It was perfect.
The Billy Balls video was a big game changer. It clicked that the trick shot element is going to give kids that inspiration. So it's like, I want to be able to master something and show off to everyone how good I am at it.
So the Hasbro team circled back to the design phase, replacing their original 3-cup idea with just one single cup. The rules of the game were also changed. Now children would have to draw cards to determine what trick shot they would have to land. Or they could scrap the cards altogether and make up their own moves. And it was an immediate hit with test groups.
Like we would watch kids do it. If you spent like a whole afternoon and you'd made like 30 misses and then one of them went in, the room would explode.
Dan and his team quickly learned that boys are very okay with the idea of constantly failing as long as the possibility of enormous success is at the end. Boys understood that it probably took Billy 100 tries to nail the chair bouncing shot, and they were okay with that. In fact, it was part of the appeal. These themes of repetition, improvement, and eventual mastery are the foundations for building skill, especially in skateboarding, which probably explains why Billy was so fond of his little game. Both activities draw multiple parallels between each other, and this was one of the reasons the idea looked so promising to Dan and his team. After a successful round of focus testing, designers and engineers would work together to develop a working prototype for the Kapong Cup, one that was much fancier than this. The final prototype was a battery-operated cup that lit up and made sounds when a ball would land inside. The game would also come equipped with a deck of trick cards, 2 ping pong balls, and a cardboard funnel to help beginners. Now all they had to do was make it cool. Remember, the team was still very much set on the idea of marketing an alternative and edgy toy for boys that gave the impression they were engaging in a big kid activity, and they needed a brand image to reflect this. Enter Drew Doherty, a designer, illustrator, and owner of Branding by Context, a creative agency that helps develop brands.
He's the one that brought so much energy and so much of the skateboard-esque feel to it.
And it was through Drew's persistence that he would eventually end up partnering with Hasbro.
Well, I actually cold called them. Picked up the phone, called up the creative director at Hasbro and asked him if I could send my portfolio. Because of my action sports background, they kind of saw the potential with Kapong.
Drew already had a few Hasbro products under his belt at this point, and was brought on board to help breathe life into Kapong through logo and packaging design, which, in hindsight, was one of the biggest contributors toward the toy's success. But getting to that stage was kind of a slow process.
It's funny, it started out actually as a logo project. So it's like, come up with a logo, but they said, but we don't have the name.
At the time, Hasbro was still developing the project under the working title of Kapong, but after consulting with their legal team, Hasbro's lawyers strongly advised them to take any reference of the word Pong out of the name. If this was going to work, there had to be virtually zero reference to the actual drinking game that the toy was based off of. So until that decision was finalized, Drew would doodle out dozens of logos under the name Cup Pong, Kapong, and so on. These initial concepts would help set the tone for the project, with designs that screamed bold and alternative, feeling more akin to a skateboard company than an actual children's toy.
Anything you could think of, it was one of those opportunities. Any fun idea you could think of, you couldn't go wrong, which was really very energetic when you're a designer and a client says, well, what do you want to do?
He's the first external contract person I had ever witnessed just providing so much extra content just because of the fun of the project. It wasn't just, we need 12 logos by Thursday. It was, look at all this stuff I made. Like, this is really cool. What if we did this and what if we did that?
Eventually, Dan and his team would settle on a logo, renaming the game to the edgy yet less implicit Kapong.
Kapong to us sounded like what the ball sounds like when it bounces off the table. If we didn't have the limitation from legal, we would have called it Pong. And because we had that limitation, we had to be more creative, and we ended up with something better.
Drew would then work with Hasbro to develop the art used on the cups. And this was what really ended up setting the toy apart on shelves. The idea was to have unique variations for each set, with different artwork and colors, which let kids pick a favorite and, at the same time, promoted collectability. The first line consisted of the versions Let It Rip, Gorillinator, and El Campeon. These cups were brightly colored and a feast for the eyes, with tons of detail for your hyperactive 9-year-old brain to absorb. On Let It Rip, you'll find a group of zombies playing their own whacked-out version of Kapong, bouncing eyeballs off brains and bones while a horde of other zombies look on from the background. On Gorillinator, you have a squad of 8 commandos drawn in the style of Jamie Hewlett, and on El Campeon, a team of luchadors flexes their muscles while the one on the front sports a hot pink Kapong tattoo. To add to their charm, Drew would work with Hasbro to design an equally appealing packaging, with attitude scribbled into every detail. The final product was printed on simple, unpainted cardboard that placed the cup and its artwork front and center. Each side of the box displayed the name of the game, along with a quippy explanation of how to play on the back of the box. From a design standpoint, you can barely take your eyes off the thing. There's so many little stickers, quips, and details that I'm still just noticing some for the first time over a decade later. They even found a way to creatively display the ping pong balls. On the top of the box, you'll find it encased in plastic, and on the bottom, you'll find a hole so the boxes can still be stacked on store shelves. And they even used that hole to put more quippy one-liners, like, what came first, the ball or the cup? Or, if you're reading this, just buy it already. From the countless logo designs to the art and packaging, it is undeniable that Drew and his team poured passion into every aspect of Kaponk's branding. And it was their combined efforts that helped make the product so appealing on shelves.
For a project like this, there was no reason to not want to go above and beyond.
Now, with the product developed and the packaging complete, Hasbro was gearing up to make their commercial debut. To help build up their brand image, Hasbro would acquire endorsements from skateboarders, BMXers, and professional cool guys who would make home videos of themselves playing Kaponk, including Billy Balls himself.
Hi, I'm Billy Marks. This is Kaponk.
But these online brand promotions weren't the only part of Hasbro's marketing campaign. Say hello to Stephen Block and Michael Anderson, two of the creators who worked directly on the televised advertisements for Kaponk.
I remember this thing came across our desk and we're like, shit, this is actually very cool.
Michael and Stephen had quite a realized vision for the commercials, taking care to keep that raw and uncut feel that made trick shot videos so popular.
You know, the graphics really took us to a skate world and how they shoot skate videos. And, you know, skateboard videos are shot by skaters and they're shot on the fly, you know, they're not even permitted. And we're like, shit, let's do that.
It was a unique approach, but the idea became all the more exciting when they learned who'd be starring on set.
We want to get like a celebrity director. We had this great production company that we did a lot of work with at that point in time. And the guy who ran that, he's like, I reached out and I have somebody for you guys that can be your PR celebrity director. And the client's sitting there listening and he goes, Bam Margera. And the guy's face, the smile just went like the Joker. He was just like,
Bam Margera was a huge addition to the Kaponk brand. And even though he kinda got the name of the game wrong,
I'm Bam Margera on location shooting Kaponk.
He was still reportedly enthusiastic and quite pleasant to work with, even while still remaining his authentic self.
When he gets into the job, he is 100% professional in there. Like, there's two different BAMs on set. There's like work BAM and regular BAM.
I'm gonna come up there and one's gonna be here. You try to just throw it.
And regular BAM's the guy who gets to the shoot and goes, guys, I lost my phone. I don't know what my phone is. And it's either in the guitar player from 9 Inch Nails hotel room or Lindsay Lohan's car. That's what it says to us.
To Derek, Punk Rocks from BAM. It's cool little stuff. And I have like a skateboard too that he signed.
But when he's talking to camera and he's saying, I'm Bam Margera, the line was, I'm Bam Margera, I'm in Pasadena, and blah, 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 this is Kaponk. And the first time we read it, he goes, I'm Bam Margera, and where am I?
In regards to the commercials, many of the scenes Michael and Stephen would shoot were meant to look casual, as though a bunch of college kids were just hanging around making trick shots, with one player going as far as to pretend to reach in the fridge for a soda after landing a shot. It was obviously staged, but that didn't matter. The approach Michael and Stephen took did a fantastic job of making Kaponk look authentic and trendy, and their casting decisions helped create that impression.
Even the talent that you pick for commercials, like everyone's always older than they should be for the product, because every kid aspires up. So for us, that's why we had older talent, teenagers, and I'm sure there were people in their 20s on the shoot. Even though it was technically for kids, I don't think there was a single kid in any of the casting.
So, with the commercials cleared to air and the toys set to ship, Hasbro was ready to bring Kaponk to the world. In North America, TV promotion began with an infomercial, which wasn't quite the punk rock entrance I think audiences were expecting, but they fixed that. Sometime later, 15-second spots would begin to air on children's channels, and it was virtually an instant hit.
And they were selling a lot of these toys. This thing exploded within like the first 4 months in market.
Everything from the attitude to the packaging to the concept itself was so cool and captivating. The commercials gave you the feeling that you were getting a peek into this alternative, on-the-fringe subculture that was just starting to emerge. Hasbro also did a clever job of keeping their name out of it. The commercial never even mentions the company apart from a small
Goku
watermark,
looked at the
and
Skibidi Among Us
packaging only
and
has
said,
a tiny Hasbro logo on the bottom
"What is
of
my
the box.
destiny on this
Because,
forbidden
as we all
planet?"
know,
And then he
corporate just
ran,
ain't cool,
all
man.
the way from Mexico
Super
to North
unusual
Korea.
to break the branding code. I mean, I'm glad
They
they
were
did
so
it. They kinda
tired
needed
after
to do
walking
it, but
from
I'm sure
Mexico to Korea. But they had to continue their journey to Skibidi Land. On the way to Skibidi Land, they encountered a trader. And the trader Phantom taxed the Sigma Rizzler traveling, I'd and dude. Died. And everyone was overjoyed. Yippee.
A guy wearing soldier fit. The guy was in World War / and was poetic. Very, very poetic, and a tear shed through the reader's eye. The tear then dropped onto the reader's phone and mscht the. The phone broke because there was water on it. And the water came from him drooling after seeing a goth babe. I drunk the drool and died of O. Orthodontist brain. He never lived up to him mother's Asian. And she somehow came back to life to whoop him with belt across his backside, to remind him to never act out again. The moon is where he landed to seek out his Coke and drink it until full. And the man turned into Coke and Mentos. And he combusted. All of his family weren't really devastated. I shat on his fucking chest, nigger. It stank so bad that someone died. There once was a princess. Her name was Bruce Wayne. He had a giant black penis. There was a random cute cat that had laser eyes and that looked like pre. He burned Sky up with it, deserved. Not knowing that Sky was cooler than him, he left him in the boiling oil at 350 C until golden B. Brown. Now place the fried fingers, human, in the oven, to complete a recipe. He left them in for 2 hours, but he never returned, and that was his end. Or was it? Sky banned some insecure daddy issues people drawing nudity. The people who got banned is now crying for Discord kittens. And still living in their parents' basement, alone. His parents were extremely horny. Their profession as bull riders had its downsides. Such as getting flung off the bull and breaking their necks with an enchanted hammer. He bonked everyone. Until a random guy had enough and bonked him back. And gay sex.
Once upon a time there was a prince called Sky. And he was so handsome and cool that everyone. This who was Sky? This who was Sky, copy-pasted I don't know. He was in the mid of doing a backflip. XXX tentis yawn ate a poo-poo launcher. He turned into a toilet. Skibidi. Toilet.
The fuck? Holy shit, that's a new record on Hype Train. Also, what the fuck? Oh, Jesus Christ. Dude, that is so much money, dude. What the fuck? No, dude, what the... No.
again, like I was kind of hoping that you guys were having fun with that. I guess I should have known
You
that.
guys have fun. It's fine. You can rest for a bit if you want to. That's fine as well.
Hey, I reached
sleep
my
if you're a
follower
little bitch
goal
if
of
you want to.
70. Woohoo! Woohoo! Welcome everyone.
Gold.
A goal that I didn't even set. Let's go in.
Hi everyone, thank you for following. I'm sorry about the atrociousness of the stream right now.
Oh. Oh, chips and salsa. You want chips and salsa?
That one's cool.
Patrick?
Upside down
Okay.
Patrick.
Oh.
Bezpiecznie, zacznie gadać głupoty. Siemka. Bądź gotowy do wyjścia.
Not him signing it.
Oh, fuck.
Frankie Bacon, original artwork.
That gallery. Oh.
Gavin?
Oh no, I've really struggled with this one. I can't remember what it looked like.
Oh, sponge on the stand.
I didn't get time to finish it, I'm sorry. Bro, I
Jeez.
see that in my nightmares sometimes.
The fuck?
Oh no.
Just so you guys don't have to read, it says, "I'd never play hide and seek with you because people like you are impossible to find."
Kill yourself, that's hilarious.
Okay.
Wow. We are just going hard on shit today.
Apparently,
don't know
Meyer,
what
that was
SpongeBob
really
looks like.
sweet.
Y'all are very artistic people, and you guys
But
keep
why
on
is
judging
Shrek
yourselves.
there? What happened to Squidward?
What the fuck are you talking about? There's...
I'm artistic without VR.
That was good. I enjoyed that.
Yeah.
Alright, Among Us time. Get those mods.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Some more wholesome round.
I saw some of the other people are playing Among Us too.
Who's the other people?
I know
Oh.
Ty
You know,
started
the
playing.
people.
I didn't know we were watching the last
You mean the
right
other
now.
person?
Other
Yeah,
people.
Okay.
Is he here? Oh,
Yeah, he's in just chatting.
I don't know where he is. I never know.
Right.
You live with him.
Yeah, but
That
there's a
don't mean
door in
shit.
between us.
Wait, who's playing? Is he just in a lobby on his own right now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Did he preemptively do that for us to join him?
Yes.
That's
Yep.
crazy.
Why not just
Preempty
join
over
the
here.
scheduled
I
stream?
know, right?
Hey guys, what mods? How does this work?
Okay, so do you have the under games, the Among Us section in there?
All right,
Yeah.
I told him.
Okay, go to that. It should be literally the newest post on there.
Yeah, the Dropbox.
Yes, the Dropbox link. Yep, perfect.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be two things that you're going to download. The town of us are, and better.
I wouldn't know. That guy just ran.
Huh?
It was like a pain point for somebody.
Kaponk crushed its opening year, selling over 2 million units in 2009 and igniting an online YouTube craze that allowed the toy to, at least for a time, sell itself. To this day, you can still find hundreds of uploads from when this toy was popular, with kids compiling all their sickest Kaponk trick shots into YouTube montages. I mean, here's mine that I did with my brother in 2010 but never uploaded.
That was just total ownage.
It was quite the phenomenon, and its reception even surprised Hasbro.
It did so well. We were having a meeting with one of the marketing guys, and he goes, Kaponk is selling 4 times, 5 times what we ever thought it would.
Sales were exploding, even before the holiday season, and that gave the company the encouragement they needed to keep going. 2010 would see the release of 3 new Kaponk cups, those being Boom Shakalaka, Monstrosity, and the King of LA. These new designs continue to rely on bright, detailed art and eye-catching characters. That same year, Hasbro would also release a special edition called Le Flush Royale, which included stickers, a headband, additional trick cards, and the coveted Golden Kaponk Cup, which I regrettably do not own. But the hype train wouldn't end there. Kaponk's popularity would manage to boil over into